The blue and yellow flag over the Kinburn Spit, a real sensation straight from the front line. For 4 years, Russia clung to this strategic foothold with its teeth, turning it into a base for sabotage, launching Shaheds at Mykolaiv and enforcing a naval blockade of Ukraine.
The only possible way for them to get out to the open sea is by traveling through the Dnipro-Bug estuary canal. So, for their strategic operations, being stationed right there is absolutely crucial.
And now everything has turned upside down. The enemy's logistics have been reduced to zero. The occupiers are hastily abandoning their positions in panic, and intelligence is recording an urgent evacuation. But don't rush to celebrate just yet. If everything is so obvious, why aren't the armed forces having the initiative, launching an assault or carrying out a large-scale landing? What is the General Staff really planning? The answer will surprise you. Watch until the end. Next, we'll reveal how Kinburn is right now determining the fate of Crimea and what strike is being prepared in the south. So let's begin. Where exactly is this spit located and why is it so important? Without this context, the rest of the picture simply won't come together in your mind. The Kinburn Spit is a sandy peninsula about 45 kilometers long that juts into the Black Sea and separates it from the Dnipro-Bug estuary. Its width varies from 4 to 12 kilometers. Before the war, this was home to Ukraine's first regional landscape park. Unique nature, protected areas, crowds of tourists. But since February 2022, all of this has turned into a closed military zone under the occupiers' flag. Why is Russia so fixated on this strip of sand? First of all, this is the last occupied part of the Mykolaiv region. Secondly, whoever controls Kinburn holds the exit from the Dnipro to the Black Sea at gunpoint. From here, the invaders relentlessly shelled the civilian infrastructure of the Ochakiv and Kutsurub communities for years and also launched attack drones at the right bank of Mykolaiv. On this very patch of land, sabotage and reconnaissance groups were trained as well as drone operators who were then sent into Ukrainian-controlled territory. In addition, it is precisely because of this occupation that dozens of ships, including those under foreign flags, remain blocked in the ports of Mykolaiv. So this is not just a military foothold, it's an economic noose for our entire southern region. Russia seized the Spit in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion. Since then, the armed forces of Ukraine have repeatedly delivered powerful strikes against it. In August 2024, special forces from the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine even destroyed the occupiers' fortifications and raised the flag there. But at that time, they were unable to secure a foothold and completely drive out the enemy. Extremely complicated logistics and the narrow, fully exposed terrain got in the way. A frontal assault did not work here. And it was precisely then, when brute force failed to deliver results, that a completely different tactic was employed. Instead of pushing straight through, the armed forces of Ukraine, together with the South Group, began systematically wearing down the occupiers' logistics. Instead of a frontal offensive, the focus shifted to a comprehensive isolation campaign. This is the very same approach that worked brilliantly in 2022 on the right bank of the Kherson region. Back then, the enemy was not attacked head-on either. Instead, their supply routes were cut off, their forces were drained, and everything collapsed on its own. Now, this strategy is being implemented in the south, but with the help of a new generation of drones.
That's why logistics there are also quite complicated, and it has always been that way. Even before the war started, getting to the Spit, especially to some settlements like Remby, was quite difficult.
Ukrainian medium-range drones have taken total control over all supply routes, both during the day and at night in any weather conditions. They systematically destroyed command posts, fuel convoys, and transport vehicles. At the same time, a strike was carried out on the Molnia strike drone bases in the Ochakiv area. It was from there that the occupiers terrorized Mykolaiv. As noted by the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, Ukrainian defenders are now trying to establish tight fire control over the logistics routes in the Kherson region. And the Kinburn Spit is one of the key targets of this powerful pressure. The results were not long in coming. On June 8th, the partisan movement Atesh recorded that units of the Russian 337th Regiment began urgently abandoning their positions. This was not an organized retreat. Russian soldiers simply fled because without food, ammunition, or fuel, there was nothing left to fight with. The situation was clarified by the commander of the Odessa Operational Tactical Group, Colonel Denis Nosikov, who reported that the supply of ammunition, food, and fuel to the Spit is effectively blocked, and our intelligence is clearly recording the beginning of the evacuation of certain enemy units. And now today we see the Ukrainian flag over Kinburn. This is the culmination of an operation that was carefully planned over weeks. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now because the most interesting analysis is coming up next. Why aren't the armed forces of Ukraine launching an assault, and what does all this mean for Crimea? So the flag is up and the enemy's evacuation is ongoing. But a logical question immediately arises. If the occupiers are retreating, why aren't the Ukrainian armed forces landing troops and securing the area right now? The answer, and it's a very honest one, is given by the military political observer of the information resistance group Alexander Kovalenko.
This bridgehead is not pressed up against a natural barrier like the Dnipro River and has access to the Zaporizhzhia region. There is a network of roads, highways, and lateral routes there. Therefore, comparisons with 2022 are partially possible, but overall, they are incorrect. Completely different scenarios are needed to liberate the left bank of Kherson region. Alexander Kovalenko.
The expert explains that the situation in Kinburn is nothing like Kherson in 2022, no matter how much we might wish it were otherwise. At that time, the Russians were squeezed up against the Dnipro on a bridgehead of less than 5,000 square kilometers, with no way out. Now, however, the Dnipro group controls more than 45,000 square kilometers of the left bank and has direct access to the Zaporizhzhia region with an extensive road network. And if we talk specifically about a landing on the spit itself, purely practical problems arise. Even for the Russians, with all their resources, logistics there were hellish. They mostly delivered everything by helicopters because ground supply for them essentially ends already in the Pokrovsk area. For our troops, the situation would be no better.
If Ukraine were to land troops on the Kinburn Spit, how would they be supplied? Across the Dnipro estuary? That is extremely complicated logistics. And to do this just so that our soldiers would spend months there under shelling, drone attacks, constant pressure from the occupiers, with minimal ammunition and without the ability to properly take cover, that's the wrong approach. Alexander Kovalenko.
Moreover, right now it's peak mosquito season on the Spit. The landscape is completely bare and it's practically impossible to set up reliable positions there. If Russia senses a real threat of losing this cape for good, it will send additional reserves there because it fully understands its strategic importance. So Kovalenko's conclusion sounds harsh but realistic.
If it's only about holding the Kinburn Spit, it will be Krinky 2.0.
Do you remember Krinky? The bridgehead on the left bank of the Dnipro, which our soldiers heroically held for months under inhuman conditions, under intense fire, without proper supplies, and with no opportunity to build on their success. The cost of that operation was enormous. It is precisely this kind of exhausting scenario that our command is now trying to avoid. So what is the right strategy then? An amphibious landing on Kinburn would only make real military sense as part of a much larger operation, with the objective of advancing at least as far as the line of Pokrovsk, Vasilivka, Heroiska, and up to the border of mainland Kherson region near Krestova Saga, and ideally even further to Lake Adzihol and the T-2216 highway. Then it would be possible not just to take the Spit, but to cut off a much larger Russian bridgehead.
Can they ensure full control over such a large area? No. The main thing is to calculate in great detail and with precision exactly where to apply pressure so that all this control collapses like a house of cards. Kovalenko.
According to the analyst, the optimal time for more active operations is the end of August or the beginning of September. Until then, it is necessary to keep strangling enemy logistics along the key highways P57, P47, M17, and M14.
If logistics in the Kherson region along these routes is completely halted, then we could really see some very interesting scenarios emerge. And they might not only concern the Kinburn Spit. We might even see the Oleshki Sands. Kovalenko.
And here the main dimension of this topic appears on the stage. Crimea. Military expert Oleg Zhdanov views the situation around Kinburn much more broadly. According to him, even the very fact that the Russians have left the Spit is a huge success, since the occupiers used it as a major training center for saboteurs and UAV operators.
We have repeatedly struck these facilities, trying to destroy the training infrastructure. But the effectiveness of such strikes was about 50-50. The withdrawal of the Russians from the Kinburn Spit would mean a much higher level of security for us and would create more opportunities for our own operations in this area. Oleg Zhdanov.
However, the most important thing is where the expert is looking next. He is convinced that in the long run, the Kinburn Spit is capable of becoming a powerful staging point on the path to the deoccupation of the peninsula. So the blue and yellow flag over Kinburn today is not the end at all. It's just the beginning of a new decisive chapter in the great battle on the southern front. And while Moscow is frantically trying to convince its own people that everything is strictly going according to plan, the Ukrainian flag is already flying where the occupiers did not expect to see it even yesterday. That's all for today. If you found this analytical episode useful, be sure to give the video a like. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next videos.